Is up, people? Today we are going to be having another interesting stream, okay? Because we're going to be talking about what is happening right now around the world. But first things first, before we go ahead and get into it, where are my miners? Welcome to the stream, New World Order, guys. We talk about the serious events going on around the world and just getting you generally aware of what's going on and what to expect. So when the incoming collapse happens, we are not caught with our pants down, because for a lot of times I don't think we realize how close we are not only to a nuclear disaster, but realistically how close we are to everyone. By everyone I mean maybe 95% of the population pretty much suffering severely. Okay, so we got to be aware of these things. We got to be talking about these things. Okay, and one of these big crises that is going to cause one of these big societal hardships is energy. Okay, the US is having a big energy problems on their hands right now, particularly not the US itself, but the U.S. allies or Western allies. As you guys already know, we're talking about the issue that's going on in Europe right now, that it's affecting the rest of the world, not only in terms of agriculture, because the Ukraine situation, they're pretty much the biggest exporters of grain to the rest of the, not just the world, but like to their region too as well. So that shipment got hindered, but also energy, right? Because not only Ukraine supplying energy to some European countries, what you also have to understand is a lot of the pipelines that Ukraine controlled actually came directly from Russia. And as you understand, there's some issues going on that caused that tap to stop. But you know now Europe isn't really getting its oil, nothing's really happening. Well, something is happening, but it's getting crazy, right? Because up until recently, that same pipeline that was flowing through from Russia through Ukraine or even around there towards the European nations simultaneously just blew up. It's gone. Boom. Bombed, right? And no one really knows what happened to it, right? Someone's asking questions. Maybe you have few media outlets going around and saying, hey, what's going on, right? Do we know what happened to this pipeline? Like, how did it explode? What the F happened, right? But when you look at the media at large, the first thing you would think of is, well, it makes sense that Russia would do it. Yeah, the Russians, right? The Russians, they're the ones who are responsible for the bombing of their own pipeline, even though they're the same ones that shut it off, right? And at first glance, you would think, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense, right? That makes a whole lot of sense. They definitely want to ensure that they don't give gas to Europe, but then why would it why would they then bomb their own pipeline? So what ends up happening is people start to think a little deeper, right? A little deeper. Then they start to pay attention to certain things that go on around the world. Like for instance, certain things that media, or not media representatives, are government officials, particularly U.S. government officials, talk about, right? So, for instance, we've had all the way back to Condoleezza Rice and her operations regarding Ukraine, and then you also have some of these other guys right now. I think it's Anthony Blanking is his name, right? Some of these guys who are orchestrating a lot of things that are going on with Ukraine. A lot of them, if you look back, they were talking about how the pipeline could be a potential means of basically trying to punish Russia or trying to punish their economy, right? And even up until recently, Biden said, hey, if we have any sort of aggressions towards Ukraine, and not we, as in Russia, if Russia has any sort of aggression towards Ukraine or anything like that, the pipelines are going to be in trouble, right? And then all of a sudden, boom, all these things got bombed and explode, and no one's asking questions. And you want to understand, well, why is it that no one's asking questions? Well, the big reason is that if it is who we think it is that participated in the bombing of these pipelines, right? Well, That's a war crime. Not only a war crime, that's grounds for war, right? And why do people think that it was the Western powers that have something to do with this, right? Well, listen, they have everything to gain. Not only the fact that they've mentioned it previously, but also the fact that they have a lot because now Europe, they can't get their dependency on their oil dependency on Russia anymore. So that means that separates those regions further, right? And on top of that, now they have no other choice but to get their oil or energy from the next largest producer of oil, right? Which is pretty much the US. So now, not only did we just fuck over our European allies for the sake of throwing away Ukraine, right? But we also are now jacking up selling them jacked up energy prices they would have otherwise got for cheaper with using Russia and whatnot. So realistically, to ensure that the European powers completely severed the relationship energy wise, which is very serious for these guys, right? To completely sever it, you have to blow it up, right? Because it doesn't really make sense that Russia would do it, right? So those are all the things that are going on right now. Now, for those of you guys who wonder, well, what does Haiti have to do with all this, right? Because we're talking about Haiti. First of all, guys, I'm sorry, y'all know how I am. I can go in deep as soon as I start talking, bro. But Glass Eyes, Darren, what's good? Isaiah, welcome. I appreciate you guys being in the building. We're gonna talk some crazy conspiracy or not conspiracy, right? Because I mean, we don't know who blew up the pipeline, what happened, right? But what does this all have to do with Haiti? Well, listen, first of all, the U.S. and Haiti relationship it goes deep. All right, it runs deep back into the early 1900s. Okay, that bitch run deep. I mean, realistically, Haiti is no stranger to U.S. influence. Okay, even way back when U.S. corporations or Western corporations and special interest groups had a hand in you know basically dominating a little bit of the local, not just local economy, but the resources that the Haitian people had. So basically, we do what we usually do as Western powers. We go in and basically, with the power of the U.S. corporation, jack the shit out of the precious resources the indigenous or local governments have there, and then ship it all back to the states. And we'll do whatever we can to protect our interests. So way back in the day, that's kind of the deal we had set up. And then what ended up happening was you start to have the rise of the other power, right? The little guy with the mustache, that decided to start massacring Jews at a alarming rate. Yes. So there were situations going on in Germany at the time, and for a while, Western powers were worried about the German influence on the Haitians, right? Because they didn't really like the whole idea of all that, basically them being influenced by another superpower, because they considered countries who were like in the South Americas as part of the region in which the Western powers needed to dominate, right? So in pops what's called the Monroe Doctrine. And for those of you guys who don't know what the Monroe Doctrine is, the Monroe Doctrine is basically the U.S. policy at that time, basically saying, hey, we're not letting any outside influence in our region. Okay, pay attention to that, right? We are not letting any outside entity in our region of influence, all right, or sphere of influence. So South America, all these Latin American countries, all these it's ours. All right, we are preventing any powers. So the U.S. got in and they basically set up this fucked up deal with Haiti, which it basically was so lopsided. It basically gave the U.S. control of a foreign entity's government. Now think about it. Imagine this, right? Imagine if a country like China walks into Cuba, right? Just kicks in the door to Cuba and basically just starts, putting people that they want into the government and saying, hey, all your economic resources, we got control of that. All your natural resources, we got control of that. All your voting powers, we got control of that. Matter of fact, we have control to veto anything that you guys have. So realistically, you guys are a de facto state of us, right? Of China. Like, how would you guys feel, right? I mean, we'd be like, hey, yo, that's kind of fucked up. Like, how are we just gonna come into another country, take over their government, take over their resources, take over their economy, take over everything, and say, hey, you know what? Just to make sure, in the name of freedom, and you guys don't get influenced by German powers, we have to control everything. And that's basically what happened. So we occupy Haiti for a very long time. And don't get it twisted. I'm loosely just describing all this stuff, right? But from what I researched, it was a very violent occupation. I mean, we would ride around like killing just civilian. Not want to say civilians, but some civilians were caught in the crosshairs. But from what I gather, it was basically the local resistance that were there because, of course, Haitians don't like the idea of a foreign power invading their country and basically running their government. So you're going to have these local gangs that are going to spring up and, they're going to try to fight and, reclaim their government. And we decimated a lot of those guys. Now, over time, conditions started to stabilize under our occupation underneath Haiti. That the Western powers were like, you know what, everything's cool. Corporations are getting the resources that we need. We're getting our bananas from all these other South American countries, so we're all good here. Let's go ahead and leave Haiti, but we're gonna put our puppet guy in charge to make sure things, run smoothly. Obviously, once the U.S. left, things immediately fell under, into just disarray, right? Because realistically, people don't like having the idea of a puppet government that wasn't originally supposed to be there running of what is supposed to be a sovereign nation. So obviously you'd have resistance group, and this resistance group came in the form of, I think they were, if you call them liberals, but they got like pretty radicalized and they raised an army. Before you know it, they started taking control of the natural resources. And the US at the time, the government, I forgot the president's name, so don't quote me on it, but the president at the time was like, hey, listen, we don't want another hard occupation like we did last time. We want something a little soft. So let's figure out how we can side with the resistant group and just dethrone the current the current guy at the time. So they institute their guy, but they're still having issues till this day. Now, what does that bring us to? That brings us to what's happening right now, because Haiti is in big trouble, right? Because those same gang rebellious type resistance that usually arise from a country that's not doing so well, that has poor economic opportunities, things like that, right? Well, they're up and at them. And typically when you have countries that are either under occupation or they are having their resources jacked, or because they're poor countries and things like that, what up happening is you're gonna start having the local resistance groups rise up. And you see this everywhere. No matter what, in every third world country, you see that U.S. or Western powers occupies, right? Because then what the corporations do, they come in with these unfair trade deals that pretty much fuck over the local population in favor of the Western governments. And then what happens is there's not enough resources to go around to the local population. And even the money that the population is earning or the government's earning doesn't actually go to the people. A lot of times those countries have corrupt governments, so the government end up pocketing all the cash and little goes to the people. So last time we Haiti we left Haiti in the hands of a puppet government. This was essentially what ended up happening. So the conditions in Haiti got pretty bad, that what ended up happening is a new leader rose up and pretty much corralled a lot of the people. And what they started doing, these resistance groups, they started going after Haiti's resources. And for those of you guys don't know, one thing that Haiti's known for is their oil. Okay, so there are these oil terminals that these gang leaders have basically, or they call them gang leaders. The U.S. calls them gang leaders, but these are local militias that usually, or resistance groups is what you'd call them, and they're guarding or blockading these oil terminals. Now, why is that a big problem? Because earlier in the stream, I just explained to you guys that we're having an issue right now with war, right? And with the war, it's a war of oil, right? The war of energy. Europe is going to be starving. Europe is looking for a new energy partner, and they think they found that in the United States, but the United States also have to figure out ways to keep that oil flowing. Now we have massive reserves, but I mean, we got to have more than enough to feed the other countries. So we got to squeeze our partners dry. We got to go to each and every one of these little countries that we control or territories, and we got to squeeze them dry for all the oil so then we can sell it at a higher price to Europe. That's what's happening right now. So with that being said, we can't have a small territory like Haiti with these gangs blockading these oil terminals that we need. God damn it. What do you mean? We got to go in there and get those guys out. But Mr. President, Joe Biden, we've had a bad history with Haiti before. Remember, it was pretty brutal. The American people still kind of remembers that, all right? So we can't just go into Haiti. We gotta do something, right? Well, how about this? Instead of calling these guys resistance groups, let's call them gang members, okay? And that way, instead of us just going in there with a massive force, boots on the ground, we'll send in a small tactical group. We'll get them in on boats, all right. And their main mission is to, make sure we restore some semblance and order. Now, what does this mean? Now, the problem is that the U.S. has is this guy named Barbecue, okay, Jimmy Barbecue. For those of you guys who don't know, let me share my screen here. Jimmy Barbecue is basically the local I would call him a resistance guy that basically rose up. And the way he came into prominence was basically uniting a bunch of Haitians gangs in that area and basically uniting them against a common goal. Now these guys have gotten incredibly organized now, and they're really wreaking havoc on basically the resources down there, and they're making demands and things like that. And I believe this guy was also featured on Vice, and the gang he leads is called the G9 Coalition of Gangs. That's literally what it's called, the G9 Coalition of Gangs, and he is causing a lot of issues right now. Right now for the United States. So right now we're sending some guys out there. There's a little thing on him. Actually, let's watch this little video on this guy.
His name is Jimmy Chalamet, more commonly known by his childhood nickname Barbecue. Once a Haitian police officer, he is now the leader of a powerful confederation of gangs called G9, which controls much of Port-au-Prince and its suburbs. With an automatic rifle strapped to his chest, Chalamet took us through the garbage-strewn alleyways of La Saline, a sprawling slum. He urged us to show the world the desperate poverty in which millions of Haitians live out their lives without basic sanitation, health care, education, or hopes for a better future. Although he is the feared leader of a violent criminal gang, Chalamet appears to be trying to reinvent himself as a leader, a man of the people, battling a corrupt system and the current government led by Prime Minister Ariel Henry.
And what you guys got to notice, Ariel Henry is one of the guys that I think we put into place. Actually, he's one of the guys that we left into place, replacing the last coup that we helped depose. And if you guys don't know, the last coup was based off of he was assassinated by Colombian militias or Colombian mercenaries, right? So they came in and assassinated the other guy, which was like a weird ass coup, and then Henry was put into power. Now things haven't changed, and what you guys have to understand is a lot of times things don't change in these countries, right? Because when we go into these countries, we go into it with our special interest groups, usually American corporations, and we have to make sure that when we're in these countries, they have to align with our interests, because if that doesn't happen, well, what ends up happening is now we have to go in and ensure that our resources and our corporations are making money, because that's all part of the big empire. You guys understand, all that money is coming in to fuel the big bad machine. So when some of these countries aren't acting the way we want them to act, we have to go in there by force. But here's the problem. The problem happens is when these countries have these puppet government that we install, they obviously are on the program of helping the US keep its status quo. And by definition, it screws over their own people, because you can't serve your overlords and then serve the people at the same time, right? Because a lot of these guys, then they your overlords are the ones that put you in power. So screw the people. Matter of fact, your job is to make sure the people stays in line and they don't revolt, right? And that's all it is. And a lot of times the US don't really care how these countries put their or keep their people in line. And a lot of times these countries result to harsh dictatorships or result to harsh measures to keep their people online. So essentially we're simultaneously sponsoring dictatorships across the world in all these little territories that we're basically occupying, while we're out there talking about freedom and altruism and democracy. So it's very, very interesting that we can go out in the world with those two modes of thinking. But here's the big problem: whenever we go in and we economically screw over a country, or we military occupy a country, what ends up happening is you can't beat the will of the human species. All right, that's the thing. We have incredible will to survive. Eventually you're going to have guys like this. It's almost inevitable when things get tough. Eventually there's always going to be people like this, no matter what, in this world, no matter what country, no matter what language. If you push the people hard enough, a leader is going to pop out. And in this case, this guy was a former cop. He was a former cop, then he got turned into a gang leader, and then for some way somehow he managed to unite all the gangs in Haiti to form a massive federation that's blocking oil terminals right now that the US needs to sell to Europe, because we blew up pipelines to ensure that Europe never gets oil from Russia. Do you see how this shit's escalating? Do you guys see how this thing starts to like really escalate and come together? So now this guy, what you guys have to understand, he's America's number one target right now. He's basically the Black Bin Laden in Haiti. So the special operations that US just launched, I think it was a couple days ago. They just launched it. It's the Coast Guards. They sent them over to the port where the oil terminals are located, right? And so they're kind of like surveying the port right now, but do not be mistaken, they're there for one and one only purpose, is to secure this oil terminal. Okay, and these guys are controlling it. I think they're also this was an article that was put out a year ago, and they've been in control of some of these cities and how they've been kind of building things right now. So let's go ahead and play this little video I found on what's going on, right? It's by this news channel. And by the way, guys, if you guys can find any form of alternative media, all right, you go ahead and find it, and you guys go ahead and listen to them, right? Because even finding some of these information, it starts to get difficult, right? Because censorship is real and it's happening. As we're getting towards a war right now, and the propaganda is starting to fly, right? You guys have to understand, man, it's important now more than ever to keep on top of the truth and what is happening, because it's very easy for us to get easily swayed. For instance, man, like listen, the war world 3 is closer than we think. Listen, China's Xi Jinping. This is going to be next week's episode, I think. China's Xi Jinping right now. He just did. I think not. It wasn't him or one of his ministers. It was as a defense guy. I got to. It'll be another video. But he basically came out and he acknowledged the annexation that Russia did of the Donbass region. Right. So they're clapping that. They're saying, "Hey, hey, Russia, congratulations!" And guess what? China, in addition, we have also completely secured Hong Kong. Hong Kong is now completely under the control of Beijing, and Taiwan is next. You understand that, right? They're openly saying that. This recently happened in a speech, people, and you don't hear this in the Western media. The Western media will not tell you that. A lot of what Western media is telling you right now is, oh, China is gonna break apart. They're failing. Russia's economy is failing. Putin, he's crazy, man. He's taking pills, and they're putting him on the ground, and all this crazy stuff. It's not true. In reality, China and Russia are growing closer together, like closer than you can ever imagine, dude. So the battle lines are being drawn right now as China has witnessed the success of Russia's annexation of these regions in Ukraine and possibly taking Ukraine as a whole, right? This is inspiring them to basically say, hey, we're going to fulfill our prophecy here. We're looking at Taiwan and you're next. And on top of that, US, you just basically canned, you guys don't notice, the US basically offered an ultimatum, which is the most dangerous thing in the world. They just offered an ultimatum to a lot of US citizens in China right now that are manufacturing these chips for their semiconductors and whatnot, right? Essentially, they said if you better choose between working in China or your American citizenship, right? So what's happening right now is a lot of American citizens or these engineers, mechanical engineers, these guys who are working these massive industrial industries, right? So they're having no choice but to flee, right? And they're fleeing right now because they don't want to lose their citizenship. So now what is China going to do? China doesn't have people to really help, create chips and things like that, right? So eventually, what they're going to start doing is they're going to start eyeing, their once called territory that is a huge manufacturer of these chips, right? That the world so importantly needs. And if we're going to start creating the conditions of war, we have to start acknowledging that that's what we're doing. We have to start setting this up that, hey, uh, this is what's going to happen because China now we're pushing them closer towards jacking Taiwan, and with this whole fuel crisis that's happening, and everything, we're setting up for a pretty big showdown, and I think a lot of us have to really, really pay attention. So the next big thing that's going to really hit us right now is going to be, all right, this big economic downturn that we're going to be facing, especially when energy prices go up. Darren the Great, what's good? Shout out to you. Glasseye says, "What do you think of Al Jazeera?" I'm either or. I try to find certain things that support. Like the basically when you do your research, you're looking at all types of media. The ones that Al Jazeera, I kind of I will tell you this: I will trust Al Jazeera more than MSNBC. I would say that, or realistically, Fox News. I would say that, but they have their biases too as well. So you just got to be careful with a lot of these things. So let's play this video.
Story on this show, which is the coming invasion, I'm calling it invasion, of Haiti by U.S. military forces. Then last night we saw some major movements in that regard. The United States Coast Guard sending one of its largest gunships to start patrolling off the coast of Haiti near Port-au-Prince. The United States has canceled visas as well. It looks like things are only getting worse. We're entering a heated situation right now. We want to bring in independent journalist Dan Cohen, who's been following the story from the very beginning. He's been doing some excellent.
And that's how you know shit's about to get hot. Okay, when the United States starts canceling visas and starts saying, "Hey, no one else from this country can go to or from your country. We gotta stop. No more traveling." You already know stuff's about to get hot, especially if they're sending in gunships and they're saying, "Not no more visas." It's gonna get hot. But like the way the media paints it, it's like a soft occupation, not a hard one. Let's continue.
Journalism on this, and we'd like to welcome back to the show Dan. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, Clayton.
Absolutely. So we were talking last night. It looks like things are starting to ratchet up, and these, of course, this is what you've been following and saying this was about to happen. It looks like last night things started happening. So what is the very latest?
Well, I think you're right to call it an invasion rather than the nice euphemism of military intervention, which sounds so much more palatable. And right now, Brian Nichols, the top State Department official for the Western Hemisphere, and figures from the Pentagon, top Southcom commander, are in Haiti meeting with the interim prime minister, Ariel Henry, as well as figures from the opposition group that is very close to Washington called the Montana Accord. And they're basically figuring out how they can put down this protest movement. And their main concern is the blockade on the fuel terminal where Haiti gets 80% of its fuel. And that's blockaded by an armed group called the G9, led by Jimmy Barbecue Cherizier. This guy's the #1 target of the United States. And if there is any military
That's this guy.
intervention, call it what you will, this guy's the target. The G9 is the target. If you look at the readout from the State Department, they're careful not to say his name, but they say the blockade of the fuel terminal. And they've sent, as you said, a Coast Guard ship, which is under the auspices of the Department of Homeland Security. And so it makes me wonder, how is Haiti part of the homeland of the United States? Where does the homeland start and end? I don't know.
It extends very far. I mean, we had National Guard, we had U.S. National Guard deployments from Wisconsin going to Africa last week. So there is no border to the United States, right?
And I'm in Wisconsin, which is crazy.
U.S.'s backyard, Latin America, the Caribbean.
Right.
So they send this Coast Guard ship, which is military. It's not part of the Pentagon. It's part of the Department of Homeland Security. And this thing has basically small rafts that move very quickly and are equipped with machine guns that it can deploy. And those are exactly the kind of boats that you would want for some kind of special covert operation, which is exactly what the U.S. is angling for in Haiti. So, this is classic gunboat diplomacy, where you send the diplomats down there to talk to the government, and at the same time, you kind of have the stick waiting in the water, ready for action, and it might portend something else.
So that's basically all I want to play from that particular video, because they kind of touch upon the oil terminals, right? Not a lot of media sources are touching up on that. They don't really go as far into how this plays into the larger role that's going on into the world right now, the energy crisis that we're having. But yes, the U.S. is angling to get into Haiti right now to do this, and this could be either, this is going to be another situation where, because listen, the guy that's in charge right now, Henri, that's our guy we put in power, right? So are we going to go in and assassinate our guy because he's not doing the job? Listen, we've asked Henri to step down, right? We've asked him to step down, but he's saying he doesn't want to step down, right? He wants to keep things going. Now, here's the thing, the protests are going to continue because they don't want Henri in power, which is crazy, right? So these G9 guys, they sprouted out because now they're hey, we're gonna cause economic problems for this country if this guy's not out. So it's like a rock in a hard place, right? So they're gonna send guys in to try to calm the situation, but in reality, I really think that what they're gonna do is take out this G9 gang leader, this barbecue guy, right? They're gonna barbecue the barbecue. Let's just say that, right? He's gonna get barbecued for sure, and they're gonna try to figure out how to either replace Henri with they'll end up probably rigging the election where make it seem as though that, oh yeah, we're choosing someone else completely new and democracy and whatnot, but really it's someone that's Western influenced, right? So that's a cycle of how these things usually flow, right? And it's happening right now. We gotta see, this is the 2.0. We've done it before, we're doing it again, but this time it's closer. It has a lot to do with what's going on in the larger picture, which is what I'm more focused on, the bigger picture, because this is where a lot of people aren't paying attention to where war happens, but I'm paying attention to it. I know exactly what's coming next. Okay, there are other things happening right now behind the scenes. We're not talking about it, right? The American people, our media's, who were being distracted and being lulled to sleep, essentially, right? We got to stay awake, because one thing you guys got to understand is, I was talking to this lady, right? this goes into what I'm talking about. I was talking to this lady, right? She's an older lady, and she does not believe that it would ever get to the point where we're lobbing nukes at each other, right? First of all, we're technically already doing that, okay? We're lobbing tactical nukes at each other already, so that's already being in use, okay? But not the big mega bombs, right? But so this lady, for the life of her, she just couldn't just wrap her mind behind the thought of us pushing this gas pedal on this train so far that these nukes are going to start dropping. And I'm telling her, I'm like, man, we are closer to nukes than you think. We're closer to World War III than you think. If you think that the US, because she's on the mindset that, well, Biden's gonna back down, okay, with the Ukraine, and we're not gonna let it escalate too far. We're gonna get it to a point where we're gonna start having diplomatic solutions. And it's like, no, man. I think even at this point, even if we wanted any sort of diplomatic solution with Russia, it's just not happening. I think they've gone beyond that, and on top of that, the relationship with China has grown so solid, right? And not only energy wise, but here's the more crazy thing: the relationship has grown together tightly financially speaking. And financially speaking, we're talking about how their currency is backed, right? Because if you want to understand how the US currency is backed versus how these other countries, Russia and China, are backing their currency, you'll understand why this is representing a big problem to the US dollar's dominancy around the world. The reason is Russia and China now are actually backing their currencies by metal, like gold and silver, what it's actually supposed to be backed by, right? Not this fractional reserve type shit that we're doing because we have fiat, baseless currency that really is. I mean, technically you could say it's backed by oil, but realistically, it's there's nothing backing the US dollar, right? So it's all realistically, it's all credit. If you really think about it, the dollar is just one giant credit card. That's all it is. We don't. There's nothing behind it. It's an IOU. It's like, hey, give me this right now, and maybe later I'll pay you back. So we're 30 trillion or 31 trillion in right now. So I mean, that number is looking scary. But meanwhile, you have these other massive superpowers. One of them just got done successfully annexing a region of another sovereign country successfully. I don't care what Western media tells you. Okay, guys, I do not care what any Western outlet tells you that Russia is losing. They're not losing. They just hosted a election, right, with the regions that they've occupied or annexed, and they're basically, these guys are basically Russian now, and now they're saying anyone who attacks these new regions are going to be punished, right? And guess what? We actually did. We attacked the bridge that was close to that region and thinking that Russia wasn't going to respond. But what did Russia do? They end up lobbing missiles back into Ukraine, particularly in these data centers and actually secured locations where these high level officials were rumored to be, and I would say rumored, but they kind of had intelligence of where these guys were going to be located, and they sent targeted missile strikes from gunships, right? That was in the Black Sea. They were just lobbing these things over and just destroying these targets, right? All for coming at the region that they just annexed. So Russia basically proved that not only did we successfully annex these regions from Ukraine, now we're also proving to you guys that we're willing to defend it at all costs. We got our new trading partner, China. We're trading energy. We're trading goods and resources. We're gonna need them because now they're gonna be new guys. They're gonna help us with our technology, our chips, and our manufacturing. All right, and they're gonna help us with a lot of the financing. And listen, guys, the battle line is being drawn, and now Russia is doing something with Turkey. Like, guys, we have to start paying attention, right? Because we're marching towards the end of an empire, right? I think this is how the U.S. is basically going to eventually decline. And I'm not saying that we're going to decline in terms of, oh, we're going to be conquered. No, that's impossible. If you really look at it, it's not possible. The U.S. is just too overpowered. Okay, if not weapon wise, okay, just geographically speaking, it's not possible. It's not possible. We're just too overpowered of a country. It is what it is, right? But what would happen is that our overpowered country can still go broke. Okay, it can still go broke, and not only just that, it can go broke and lose its dominance within the global dominating space, right? The global political space, right? Because listen, people don't already trust your word as a superpower, right? And the thing is, if you're gonna be the world's police, the world's guy, the top G, the top dog, right? Well, guess what? You got to be able to show that you can stand by your word when you say that you're gonna protect these countries or you're gonna go ahead and do these things, right? But the problem is the U.S. since pretty much post inception, right? The Since the liberal hegemony has been taken over, right? We've been going back on our words and all to preserve our interests. So there are multiple countries that we fucked over. There are multiple lies that we've told. There are multiple sovereign nations we've toppled in the sake of protecting our interests. Everyone else in the world has seen this happen, and they're saying, "Hey, well, you can't. I guess we can't trust the U.S. I mean, you can't trust the West. You can't trust what they say, right? They don't back you when they come in. Now, even fast forward to what's happening here in Ukraine. You got Zelensky, who's pretty much begging us to stop in and drop nukes and put in no-fly zones and all these different things like that. But we're not coming to their aid, and we know we're not going to come to their aid. Don't get it twisted. We're not coming to the aid of Ukraine. I mean, we're going to try to, but we're going to set up lines to, right? We're going to try to maybe false flag Russia to do this because, guys, do not get it twisted. The U.S., especially what do I there's got to be a special name for these guys, right? I think there's already a name, but like the deep state, right, is what they call it. The deep state, the guys who we call the hidden hand, right? These guys, these top officials in power, and this is where we start to go conspiratorial. But like, I mean, we know what they say about conspiracies. These are the guys who are in power within these organizations that have an ulterior motive, right? And these ulterior motives are basically within the interest of their control and their dominance. Because one thing you guys gotta understand is majority of people who work in government are pretty stupid, right? I mean, think about it. The guys that handle mail and all this, they're not the greatest at their jobs, right? But a lot of these guys are influenced by either politicians, high ambition politicians, or government officials who have interests or are backed by other special interest groups, which are usually corporations, and they put in certain policies or they institute certain actions in favor of these interest groups. And what you have to understand is the deep state is not, they are working overtime right now to push us into war with Ukraine. All right. They're or not Ukraine, with Russia, using Ukraine. Okay. So they're working overtime. The pipeline, okay, no one knows who did it, but we know who did it. We know who's responsible. We know it has something to do with Western powers, right? And I know we're a smaller channel, so I can say maybe it might be the US that did it, right? So I don't want to get capped or anything like that. But it was probably us that did it. Let's just be real. It was probably us that's responsible for it. Probably elements of the deep state, right, who are working with other elements of deep states and other governments that want the liberal world order to come to fruition. All right, they're conspiring to destroy these pipelines and push us closer to war with Russia because they have a plan for Russia. All right, it's been at work since its inception, since the breakup in, I think it was the 90s. The Soviet Union broke up, right? And they didn't know that Russia or Putin was going to bring Russia to the superpower that it was today. They thought that, hey, you know what, the Soviet Union is going to break up. Now these Eastern European countries, these Eastern countries, they're going to be right under our control, right? The liberal world order, the Western order is going to dominate everything, right? But then we got the shock of our lives when Putin got into power and basically played us for suckers. We thought we were going to do the same thing with China when China was, coming down from that communism, right? They were coming off of that communism, crack, and they were like, listen, well, we got that massacre that just happened, and this shit's not working. But we still kind of want communism, but let's figure out something else. And the U.S. comes in and we're like, hey, maybe if we give them a little bit of a taste of a capitalism, right, and introduce them into the world authorities and world organizations that we have set up, maybe we can now start controlling them through the power of American capitalist ideals, right? Wrong. The Chinese, just like the Russians, played us for suckers, and now we help them become the biggest adversaries out there. So you guys gotta understand, a lot of the problems that we have with these massive nations stem from the fact that we've tried to control them. That's it. All right. The things that we've put in place, the mistakes that we've made, it was all done because we've tried to control them. Okay. And we've done this from all these other countries to all these other nations, and it's getting weird. It's getting crazy, right? And to even go even deep into it, right? Now we have a situation where Ukraine, Russia's now thinking, you know what? We got all these regions. Okay, we got all these regions. We're all set. Everything's cool. What if we just take all of Ukraine? Like, I mean, we already got these guys. They're basically, Russia. And I mean, look at Ukraine. They're running out of soldiers. They're running out of smart weapons. They're running out of all these different resources to really sustain a long-term war. I mean, let's just take all of Ukraine, right? Let's just do it, right? So that might be the next goal. That might be the next, pinpoint here. They might, just and realistically, it makes sense. They might just make the logical push and push for a whole of Ukraine, or maybe not. Maybe not. But I see that happening because at this point, it's like, why not? Why not just completely eliminate what could potentially be a threat, right? Glass Eyes, I like this question. She says, why don't we rebuild the USSR? I think Putin is doing that for us. I mean, we're helping in that case, right? Because that's what it is. We're kind of already there, right? We're gonna jack Ukraine. Those other nations that are there. I think it's Latvia, Belarus, right? All these other places, they're basically under Russian influence. So they're not really, the Russians aren't really too worried about those countries. But no, we're building that in. But here's the thing, though. What I find crazy is that because Ukraine are running out of these resources, these soldiers, and all these things, we're now finding that they're Al Qaeda and ISIS fighters fighting on behalf of the Ukrainians, being paid by Western powers to fight Russia. Like, does that make any does that make any sense to y'all, right? And I want y'all to understand this, right? We talk about ISIS and Al Qaeda, the same group of people that we spent the latter half of the century basically claiming that these guys were the bad guys. These guys were the bad terrorists, right? The guys that we got to go to Afghanistan. Thousands, hundreds died in that war, in these endless Middle Eastern wars, right? So come to find out that these terrorists that we're losing American lives to are under the control of the American government. You understand that? I want to say American government, but let's say Western government, because we're contracting them. First of all, we created these terrorist groups. Let's just be real. All right. Our actions with I think it was Osama bin Laden, right? Created Al Qaeda. Was it Al Qaeda, the Taliban? It was one of those groups of people. Osama bin Laden was definitely the head of one of those groups. Pardon me, I don't know my terrorists. I'm not up to date on it, but like, we sponsored a bunch of these bad guys that came out of nowhere. That's what it is, right? So we help create these groups to fight other groups within these other countries to destabilize them, right? So these terrorists are now being hired and contracted to send them over to Ukraine to go fight the Russians on minimum wage level, right? That's what's being happening right now. And for the American people who are out there watching and looking at this, they got to understand and say, hey, listen, man, I think it's time for us to take control back of our government, because this is starting not to make any kind of sense. This is not. How is it that these same officials are going to use these media apparatus to convince us that these Middle Eastern terrorist groups were the bad guys this whole time? And then when at the flip of a dime, whenever they want, they can just say, "Oh no, these guys are the good guys now," and now we have to fight alongside these guys that killed American soldiers to go break up Russia. It's not going to happen, and we're basically carving up Ukraine. We're going to sacrifice all of Ukraine for the goal of trying to get Putin. That's what's going to happen. And when I said earlier that Russia is going to go for all of Ukraine, they're going to go for all of Ukraine because they're doing this stuff, right? The US and the Western powers are going to do whatever they can to keep this war going. They're going to finance it. They're going to give it, they're going to do it with weapons too as well. They're going to do it with propaganda. You name it. The West is fully committed, especially the Biden administration. The Biden administration, and I would say, you know, some elements of the right too as well, especially the deep state warmongers, right? And the guys that are being paid by the military industrial complex, they have a vested interest in keeping these war going, right? And here's another wild, crazy thing. You do realize that a lot of times these weapons that we're sending over to Al Qaeda and ISIS to help us fight Russians, you know, a lot of these weapons, guess what, where they're going to end up eventually? They're going to end up in the hands, I mean, they're already in the hands of these terrorist groups, but then they're going to be in the hands being used by these guys to attack other Americans or subjugate whatever the people in their countries back at home. So, I mean, you could probably, I'm sure if you look right now, you'll probably find news of these terrorist groups or organizations who are being sent these weapons, basically holding on to some of them, maybe sending few on the battlefield, but holding on to some of them to be used to either sell to make more money, to spread more war fighting in other countries or regions, or they're using it to directly, you know, expand their war efforts in either their region or against American soldiers in a completely different country. You do understand that, right? So it's just this big quagmire of just fuckery just going on right now. And I think it's time for us to just kind of wake up and just point to the bullshit and start holding certain people accountable. And no, it's not your president, okay? Because we already know Biden is an empty husk, and so is most of these presidents that come in anyways. But you got to start looking at these Congress guys, these senators, some of these guys on the national scale that work in Washington that stay right. I mean, you go to DC right now, you'll find a lot of these military industrial complexes. They're a stone throw away from the Pentagon, right? You find Boeing is a stone throw away from the Pentagon. Lockheed Martin, a stone throw away from the Pentagon. You go to DC. I was just down there not too long ago. You fly to DC, and then there was a hotel I was staying at. It was right down. You see there is Lockheed Martin. They're big ass fucking buildings. I mean, I'm talking about buildings. They're like these 5 giant buildings around like one little area. That's them. Right, the stone throw away from the Pentagon. So you already know it's a tight relationship because war is profitable. So these guys who are creating these weapons and they're sending overseas, right, to these terrorist groups to fight, you know, Russians, you know, they're also going to be using those very same weapons to fuck us over when we go fight in another region like Afghanistan or Iraq. So these are the kind of the weirdness that's going on right now that we should be paying attention to. Not just this whole Ukrainian situation where it's just from the side of, oh, the Russians are invading and these are big bad Russians. No, they have a particular reason they're doing what they're doing. So do we. All right, I think we're coming to the point where it's the end of the empire, not as like the US, you know, going out, but like the US is still going to be dominant. It's just that other nations now, other big superpowers are going to start rising up, and it's going to be that if we don't end up in a total war, it's going to be that much harder for the US to flex its global political will, right? So you're going to see a lot more countries now bucking their head at the system. Now, here's where it's going to get crazy for the rest of us. Financially speaking, economically speaking, this is where it's going to get bad because the US dollar is no longer going to have global dominance. You guys got to understand this. This is the reason why the US is fighting as hard as it is right now to control all these other governments and to push as hard as it is with Russia. I'm telling you, we're committed to going all the way. It's because our dollar and the status of our dollar, which give us the global dominance, is very well at risk. Okay, so we have to do what we can to protect that and pretty much protect that lifeline. So what's going to end up happening now with the joint rise of China, Russia, Turkey, some of these other India, these other regional powers that are now coming into the fray, it's getting harder now for us to flex our political will. The value of the dollar is going to start plummeting. We're also seeing it in all these other Western countries too as well. Eventually, we're gonna come to that time where a lot of the things, the excessive spending that we had, right, living our life on credit, because that's what the American people, that's what consumerism, mass consumerism has done, right? We were basically living off the backs of other nations. So this mass credit that we've gotten used to, the cheap goods, the cheap manufacturing, the cheap parts, everything, it's over. All right. Things are going to start getting very, very expensive very, very soon. So that's all I got for today's episode, right? I wanted to keep it kind of under an hour. Guys, I appreciate you being here. Laughing Man, shout out to you. But what we're gonna do is next week's we're gonna go on more on the tech side of things. Okay, so we're gonna be getting started with Python. Okay, so from anywhere from installing it to figuring out what IDE we're gonna use, right? So we're gonna basically get that started. So we'll learn the basics, learn some stuff, and then we'll get started on creating our first application. Now, why are we doing this, right? Because we just got done talking about the economy going to be looking a little bit different within the next 5 to 7 years. Okay, so what a lot of you guys have to start doing is figuring out how you can start generating new skills that are going to be valuable still within this world when things go to shit, right? Because think about it, when the dollar crashes, we can no longer be a service-based economy. We can no longer be that economy. We're gonna have to be forced to start producing things so that our money is worth something again. Okay, so in order to do that, you have to start figuring out how to get into industries that are gonna be safe. Okay, and one of that is gonna be working in technology. Technology is gonna be a big, big boom because it's not something that's gonna slow down. Matter of fact, it's an industry where it's starved for people. It's starved for talent. So to learn as much as you can to start, increasing and improving your skills. I want to do my part to do it. So next week's show, come correct. Okay. If you guys are going to be watching, make sure you have at least a laptop. Okay. If you can, I think Visual Studio Code Pro can be downloaded on a Chromebook. If you have a Chromebook, whatever, just have a computer access handy. We'll go over that stuff so that way at least you guys can walk along. And for those of you guys who missed the show, don't worry about it. I'll make sure we'll try to get it step by step so you guys can follow afterwards. But that way you guys can start learning these skills, man, understanding what's going on around the world, and go on to do great things. Okay, because it's all about survival at this point. Okay, don't let the Western government propaganda fool you. Okay, we're being lulled into a false sense of comfort. Do not believe it. This is the calm before the storm. Okay, and the calm can last months, it can last years, but it's the calm. It's happening right now. You don't want to be caught without an umbrella when that storm finally hits. Okay, so you want to make sure you're prepared. You want to make sure you're being placed in an industry where you can rapidly increase your income, all right, and stash away to basically start, for a rainy day. That's what you want to stash away for a rainy day. Okay. And some of those things could be investing in precious metals, right? I still get clowned at by even my inner circle of friends, because I have my inner circle of friends and we have our own investment portfolios that we look at. And part of it's not a major part of my portfolio, but it's a small part in metals. I invest in metals. I'm a metal investor, right? I invest in mainly silver. On gold, I pick up when I can, just because it's a little bit more expensive. But mainly silver, I go balls to the walls in there because it was cheap, and it's going to start getting expensive in the future. So these are even new investment opportunities that actually they've always been there, but now we're going to start be looking at with a more closer lens, especially now with these other countries, major superpowers like Russia and China getting into precious metals. You already know that this is where the future is going to lie. So all my buddies that were laughing at me because I made a killing off of Doge. Dogecoin. I'm gonna tell you this. Dogecoin did a lot. I'm gonna just say that, okay? But what I did is I like most of my buddies, I didn't need my money in that shit. You kidding me? I started boop, 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 boop. You start diversifying and putting in a lot of what I bought was precious metals, okay? Whether on platforms or exchanges or physical but precious metals, which is, silver, gold, those things like that, right? Either or. I started investing in all this stuff, right? Because you want to hedge against inflation. Inflation is the thing that's going to kill a lot of your dollar, right? And I know, some of you crypto bros are going to be like, oh, what are you talking about? Dude, inflation, crypto, man, crypto can definitely outpace inflation. Okay, buddy. I'm not gonna argue with you on that. I'm not. I'm just saying, listen, if I'm gonna buy silver with the dollar that I have today, I just know that my purchase power is locked into this precious metal, okay? And that means down the road, silver is gonna be worth either the same or even more, right? And probably going to be worth more because you're going to start seeing these things used in electronic parts too as well. So guys, the whole world has to start changing. Commodities is what you guys start looking at, right? Farmland, you look at guys like Bill Gates. Do you see them throwing their money into crypto? Do you see them throwing their money in the stock market? I'm not saying take your money out of the stock market. If anything, I'd get ready to buy the dip, right? But not right now. There's going to be a big dip coming, right? I'd get ready to buy that one, right? Because we already know it's always going to bounce back. But for now, there's going to be a very, very massive dip coming. So you could buy that dip. That's fine. But realistically, commodities, okay, agriculture, farm, grain, all these things that are going to be, start becoming necessary, right? You're going to need to start looking around and paying attention and maybe start, figure out where you want to hedge your bets, right? Because those are the stuff that's going to start being important. All this, even stuff like solar power, right? Even in Europe right now, they're getting rid of all their solar farms, right? You remember when the SJW shit used to kick off, and everybody was like, we need to go green, we need clean energy, we need all this, right? And these guys would use this as a political tool, right, to go beat other people off in the head with, right? And they parade this Greta Thunberg, right? How dare you ruin my future, right? This little girl don't know what the hell she's talking about. And now, when it's wartime, when things got serious, all of a sudden they're looking at all these green technologies like, yeah, no, we don't. We actually need food. We need to get rid of these solar panels. These solar panel farms and start creating farmland, actual farmland. Fuck this green stuff. Like, we need food. We need energy. It's funny. It's funny how, like, when we were living life of luxury and living life of comfort, we created problems out of things that weren't really shit, right? We got to go green. And you saw how we chastised all these other nations. And now when times of war is here, all of a sudden we're figuring out what's really important. That's food. That's figuring out where we're going to get our energy from. That's figuring out how we're going to get more resources, trade, right? That's what's more important right now. So you guys got to start looking into these commodities, right? Listen, the stock market's going to be down for a while. If you're smart enough, you can buy the dip if you want. But I would say commodities right now are going to be the big thing, right? Aze, welcome to the stream. I don't know how long you've been here. Micah, welcome. Sorry, guys. Y'all know how I am. When I get in, I start talking, man. I start just going off the top. But I like this comment. He says, I knew crypto was useless when they started pushing it. Bitcoin was profitable for a hot minute, but if you didn't invest early, it's useless. That's all crypto. That's all crypto. The thing is, I got to listen. When you work in tech, there's a lot of guys who are invested in crypto and they buy into it like full heartedly, right? And even when I just listen to some of my buddies and I'm like, okay, I get what you're saying. It's decentralized, it's whatnot, but here's where my overly analytical brain comes into play, right? Because I'm like, well, is it really decentralized though? Because you have these crypto platforms that really control the money. They control the supply. And then what if something happens to these platforms, right? They're gonna have to shut down, or they're gonna have to like lock up the platform, and there goes your money. So is it really decentralized? I get it. The technology is open, right? You can go and anyone can copy a what do you call it? A token code. They can copy it and then build on top of it and deploy it out there. Anyone can do that. But is it really something that's decentralized? And when you think about it, no. Okay, let's look into how even the crypto market was behaving, right? And what they claim to do. Well, we're alternative. We're the alternative to the fiat currency. Okay, you guys understand how fiat works. Okay, they just create money out of thin air, and then it just starts getting multiplied and all these different things, and it's not really backed by anything. And then you look come to find out later, a lot of these crypto projects, a lot of these things coming out, it mirrors exactly these financial institutions that they were supposed to counter. You understand that? So it all starts to sound similar. Even some of these crypto platforms started offering loan programs, just like financial institutions, right? It wasn't that different. They were doing similar things to what banks do, that like fractional reserve lending, for instance, right? Banks do that. It's what when they take your money in, your savings, right, and then they loan that one out, right? That's exactly what these crypto platforms were doing this whole entire time. And then when they got caught red-handed, the money was gone, right? The same thing if they was a bank run on a bank, right? The bank would say, "Hey, we're sorry, oops. We know you deposited your money here, but we actually didn't have it. it was actually never here. It was gone the moment you deposited." That's the exact same thing, right? And what do you see with these crypto platforms? You see rug pulls. You see these platforms getting hacked and getting all these security elements that were supposed to be there. Not a zip, nine. It was non-existent. And at the end of the day, we just all got conned like like the rest of us, right? It was just one major transfer of wealth. That's what it was. And I really think that, if you want to get conspiratorial for a second, because that's what this channel is all about, realistically, I think this Satoshi Yamamoto guy that started this whole trend was an agent. That was an agent. All right. I believe that this was a multi-long project to get crypto to what pretty much not even just get crypto to push us into this digital age where now like currency can be controlled like that. Because think about it, a lot of these other countries already have their own versions of cryptocurrency now, which gets it easier for them to not only deploy these tokens or currencies into your checking account directly, right? Because that's what this COVID thing did. It put the money making scheme all into play. You guys understand that, right? Because y'all got the COVID checks. Guess what? That was direct deposited right into your bank account for most of y'all, right? How did they get my bank account? Oh, I did my taxes. That's why. So now they have access to your bank account, so they can deploy these little COVID relief checks into your account. Okay, that's fine, but it's just COVID relief. What happens when there's something like a war happening? And a lot of us growing up in the modern times right now, we don't know what it's like for a world to be at war, right? It wasn't like World War I or World War II, where nations within themselves that were fighting, the people were also suffering. We never had to experience that, right? So what happens when there's a massive world war and the people who are left at home that have to take care of the homeland while the men are fighting out there? What is going to happen? Because the economy still has to happen, right? So the government has to print releases, right? So they're going to deposit those checks right into your bank account using these digital tokens, because eventually, man, listen, money as you see it is going to be different. So I think this whole crypto thing was like a ploy, right? That was kicked off. And now it's a successful thing. It's been successful. Governments are modeling it now. They've mastered it, right? And now they're gonna ban it, right? So this whole thing where there was this mass transfer of these currencies, now there's gonna be a mass movement to ban these currencies and only allow the government approved ones, which is ones they directly control, to be there, with all these other limitations put into place. So that's where I think it's going. I actually might be wrong. It's a conspiracy, whatever it is. But I definitely think Bitcoin was started by the agent. I definitely think so. An agent lurking around down there. And, that's why we never knew, we don't know who the Satoshi guy is. Think about it, bro. If you were to create something like that, a lot of these guys, what is his name? Vitalik Buterin, right? Vitalik Buterin, the guy who also helped out with Ethereum, right? He's the boy genius, the boy wonder, right? The guy who you would say he invented Ethereum, but I mean there are a lot of people that went into that development too as well. But Vitalik Buterin, right, did the whole Ethereum thing, and he's out here. He wants everyone to know that he's a genius. He wants everyone to know that he's the guy that designed the Ethereum platform, that he designed all, right? So if this Satoshi Yamamoto guy, right, who invented Bitcoin, like, why would you then just go silent, right? No, of course you'd want to have your face known. A lot of this time, that's human behavior, or you'd have some kind of hint out there that you were him. There are even people pretending to be him come out and say, I'm Satoshi Yamamoto, whatever it is, right? And you got to ask yourself the question, well, why would this guy come out and just say, or why is he hidden, or whatever it is, right? Or if it really was a guy, it could have just been a group of government sponsored officials, right, who basically kicked this thing off and just hung back to see what was going to happen. And these are projects. Listen, the governments are, they're known to starting multi-year long projects. All right, look at it when the CIA was experimenting with LSD, right? It was a multi-year long project where they were literally kidnapping people off the streets and drugging them. just to test this power of psychedelics to see if they can control your mind. That's what they were doing. You realize that, right? So this was a long, multi-year project. Matter of fact, there's even rumors right now. You can call it rumors, or you can call it based on reality, of people who are still affected by those operations the CIA conducted with psychedelics, who are still affected to these days, right? Some will say some of these agents were successful in creating sleeper cells, right? Some of these guys who could probably just wake up one day and all of a sudden there's a mass shooting and we don't know what the hell happened. Well, where did this guy come from? He seemed to be living a normal life one day and he just went crazy the next day, right? Could he have been activated? I don't know. Could have been part of the experiment? I don't know. The thing is, we just don't know. A lot of things we don't know. Is just because you don't know it, it doesn't mean you don't question it, though. That's all I'm saying, guys. Am I making sense, or have I gone too far off the deep end? Let me know. Let me know if I've gone too far off the deep end, dude. I just feel like, listen, like, so even some of these murders that go on in some of these counties, or some of these things that go on, and you look at the age group of some of the people that commit it, right? And you're like, could he have been alive and could potentially be part of those experiments when that went on, right? Because there's no explanation of why this guy went in. No, but there it is. And nowadays, they blame shit like that on mental health, right? But who's to say that some of these pharmaceutical companies weren't sponsored, by, certain government agents, right? So, hey, listen, we know that they're able to introduce crack in certain communities, and, I wouldn't think crack and heroin, realistically. I would say heroin and crack, and, they can do stuff with over-the-counter drugs with these pharmaceutical companies too, right? I mean, get the people doped up. Why not? I mean, it is what it is. But yeah, it's a thing that's going on, guys. We gotta, before we dive too far into the conspiracy rabbit hole here, that's all I got, right? Realistically, I appreciate y'all being here, man. Y'all could be anywhere in the world, but next week's show, we're definitely gonna be going into tech, so you guys can get a better understanding on how to navigate just Python itself, just even getting started with one programming language. And one thing you guys got to understand is, once you start to get the hang of like one programming language like Python, when you start looking at other programming languages, you start to understand the base, the fundamental base on how they each function. So learning the best way to understand a lot of programming languages is by deeply just studying one, and then you understand the similarities. All you have to do is understand basically the syntax that particular language use, and then you'll be fine in the structure. But that's pretty much it. I appreciate it, guys. Shout out to you, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.